Okay. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening. So that's so customary statement all the time when we open the webinar. We start with these greetings. So I am so excited today. We have the wonderful people around. So I welcome all of you in today's session. We have a galaxy of stars in clinical research. Wonderful people. So I start. Introducing the keynote speaker, but just a word about myself. Most of you know me because for a very long time, I am part of these webinars on a regular basis. So my name is Sayyid Uzair, and my background is in healthcare management consultancy, and I'm also faculty with the business school. And Dr. Awaise Siraj, he's a director, research, innovation, and commercialization at National University of Medical Sciences, Rawalpindi, Pakistan. He is a pharmaceutical, healthcare, and medical devices industry veteran for a very long time. He is a medical graduate from King Edward Medical College or University, and we are lucky that we have two other graduates from the King Edward Medical College, including myself. So we are dominant force in today's webinar. And he's also having a couple of masters in business studies and social sciences from University of Strathclyde, Glasgow, and University of Leicester, UK. In his corporate career, he was the country sales manager with Boston Scientifics in Beirut, Lebanon. And in his career, he had many achievements. He was the consultant with the private sector, with the not-for-profit and the regulatory bodies. Uh, in his last tenure, he was very active and be the team leader at Prime Minister's Performance Delivery Unit, responsible for monitoring, catalyzing, and accelerating projects of national interest. So we are very lucky and we warmly welcome Dr. Awaise Siraj. Now, let me introduce our panelists. So I start with Professor Farooq Naeem. We very warmly welcome Professor Farooq Naeem for his first appearance in our webinar. Gem of a person, very knowledgeable, authenticated, and professor of psychiatry at the University of Toronto and a psychiatrist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. He was trained in psychiatry in UK and completed his master's in sciences in research methods in health, and later earned his PhD in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a very talk about topic in these days. And he has published nearly 200 peer-reviewed articles, 6 books, and numerous therapy manuals and chapters. He currently leads a special interest group for the World Psychiatric Association on implementing mental health app in low and middle income countries. So Farooqi pioneered technique for culturally adopting cognitive behavioral therapy. These techniques have been used to adopt CBT in South Asia, Northern Africa, Middle East, Kenya, and China. And the veteran friends, Dr. Professor Akhtar Hamid, he's also President Canada Pakistan Research and Development Council, and he's an assistant professor with University of Toronto and a director pediatric research and resident education, Scarborough Health Network, Toronto. So we warm welcome all the participants who has taken out their time to attend in today's webinar, and Dr. Farasat Zaman, Dr. Sarwat Hussain, all of them. We are really grateful on behalf of APPNA Merit, and you know that you earn a point, education point, by participating in these webinars. So we have conducted about 5 or 6 webinars on clinical research from different angles. Generally, we invited the CROs, and then we invited the regulator. But today's webinar is interesting because Dr. Awaise Siraj is going to discuss the management part of it, which is the key thing. And everything is successful with the complementary skills, and nothing can move forward without a proper management. So with this, may I request Dr. Awaise Siraj to start his presentation.
Sir, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Thank you very much indeed for this wonderful, wonderful introduction. And before I just move on, I would like to say my regards, and I really feel nervous as well as honored to be sitting with Dr. Farooq Naeem Saab and Dr. Akhtar Hamid Saab, and of course yourself, who has given such a fantastic introduction. I sometimes I also wonder what I've been doing all my life, but I think this is the time to consolidate, and this is the time to really find some meaning out of such experiences that I have had, and I will touch upon them during the course of my conversation. And my humblest regards to Professor Sarwat Hussain Saab for being with me today. So I'll just, before we move on, I think there is my presentation, and sorry, just bear with me for a couple of seconds. Right, Ji. So I've been, when Dr. Uzair Saab actually gave me this task. Can you see this?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So when Dr. Uzair Saab gave me this task, and I was just wondering that, what my um, hands-on knowledge about clinical research is about 22 years old. And that was when I started this. So what value am I going to add in? But then I realized that having worked with the Higher Education Commission, some universities, and some research organizations, and also working at the Office of Research, Innovation, and Commercialization, my perspective on clinical research has changed. And the first change that has come up is that clinical research is primarily a means to an end. It's not the end in itself. So what is the end? And so I just thought about it for a while, and then I came up with this little scenarios and strategy that I will be sharing with you. And before we move on, I wish I could be paid by some organizations for clinical research, but at the moment I'm not getting paid by any. But sometimes I do lobbying and government relations assignments for various organizations from time to time. The scientific literature that we have at the moment is very rudimentary, and a lot of it has been copied. I have tried to link it, and I have tried to give due reference to whatever I have copied. But the views that I'm going to present, and of course the strategy of the future, is primarily designed by me, and it is not to be associated to any institution or any kind of scientific references. So just a quick overview of what Pakistan has gone through in terms of clinical research. I've divided this into two eras, and this is just a quick repetition of what has been happening, and this has also been covered in the previous presentations of APPNA. So phase 4 clinical trials were actually started in 99, and they were happening till 2005. Well, when I got my first training on GCP in Berlin, and I came back and I talked to people about good clinical practices or GCP, a lot of them actually came back to me and said, well, GCP is Ghee Corporation of Pakistan. What has Ghee Corporation of Pakistan got to do with clinical practices? And so that was just the beginning of how actually these things started. At that time, there were mostly multinationals working on clinical trials, primarily getting their drugs and biotech drugs and other modalities into the market, and getting the physicians into hands-on practices of using these kind of new chemical entities. And at that time, luckily or unluckily, there was no registration, there were no drug rules, and I will cover them separately in one of the slides. What about the regulatory environment that prevailed at that time? So primarily, there were the global trials, and Pakistan was actually made center of one of those trials, or the post-marketing surveillance studies. The data that I have for the clinical trials registered in Pakistan, well, unfortunately, there is no registry in Pakistan to the best of my knowledge yet. But we definitely have clinical trials registered across the WHO and UK and US registries. To be very honest, I could not find time to see the overlaps between all these registries, but the wildest guess is that there are about 2,000 clinical trials registered from Pakistan in total. So there could be overlappings, and there could be, exclusive trials, but I think one needs to look at those trials in detail. Um, there has been a very slow progress since 99 to 2017, but if you can see this graph on the right, there was a big leap in 2017, and then a big really leap into 2020, and that is primarily coming from the COVID contribution into the clinical trials. And you look at the 2005 onwards history, so there were basically these societies on clinical oncology and neurology and so on and so forth, which were actually trying to push their research agendas into the system. And at the same time, there were a few clinical research organizations, contract research organizations, and I think you have heard from them in the past presentations, like IQVIA and Dr. Khurram Zaki Saab, and a couple of others. So I'm not just promoting one or the other, but I'm just giving you an idea. And at the same time, in the 2007 and 8, there was some advocacy and some interest from the government in clinical research because of Dr. Juma and others. Just moving on. Oops, I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is a quick view of the regulatory framework. Again, I have divided it into two components. It's pre-2012, where we had this Drugs Act and the Drug Research Rules 1978. Now, the Drug Research Rules 1978 were primarily designed for the research kitty that was actually going on into the accounts of Government of Pakistan or Ministry of Health at that time, which was contributed by the pharmaceutical companies. In 2002, there was some lobbying activities done by Pakistan Association of Pharmaceutical Physicians, of which I was a member at that time as well. And there was some introduction of GCP/ICH guidelines. And in 2011, the draft biostudy rules were actually put forward. Then we had this Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan Act 2012 and biostudy rules, which actually cover all the aspects of the clinical research or clinical trials were put forward, and they are now in practice. I think I've been looking at all these developments, and just a bit of my view on how these things have evolved. If you look at the history, I think we have moved forward. The bashing that is being done primarily on Drug Regulatory Authority and various authorities from different corners, I don't think it's very appropriate, because the capacity of these organizations is very limited. I see this as a progress, whatever limited that may be. But I think the world or the neighboring countries or the developed countries have moved at a much faster pace. We have also moved, but I think they have outpaced us, and we have been rather slow. So I think that's my view on the history, because I look at the data from the regional countries. So India has like 20,000 trials registered, Sri Lanka 400, Bangladesh, it's a question mark. In their own registry, it's about 55. So Iran, 10,500, Afghanistan, 22. And sometimes, yes, when I speak to the health authorities and they always come up, then why do you compare us with Afghanistan or Eritrea, for example? I said, well, I have to make myself comfortable, because I have to give myself the assurance that we are also progressing and we are not really that bad. But if we compare it with the developed world, there are, hundreds of thousands of trials going on, and the difference is too much. And the same is going to be covered in the next few slides, that how are we going to address these issues. Now, just this was the past, so and this is the current situation, and now jumping into the future, because I've learned from my experiences that whatever is happening today is actually something that we planned about 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and the present is not really in our control. Whatever we have in our control is the future. So now, having worked at educational institutions, research organizations, multinational corporations, and looking at being a member of various committees on research, like Pakistan Science Foundation and Ministry of Science and Technology, and so on and so forth, uh, I have to really think differently, and I have to think future. So, in order to really jump into the future, the technique that I use for visioning or long-term thinking or long-range planning is the scenario planning. So, scenario planning is basically looking at future from different perspectives, looking at the trends, drivers, and how things are going to shape up. So once we have identified the trends and the drivers, and then we have set up a horizon year, then we are able to see very clearly into the future. So when I close my eyes and look into 2050, so what's happening in terms of clinical research and clinical development in Pakistan? So I see a couple of drivers and I see a few trends. The drivers are the ones which actually drive the whole scenario, and they are taking charge of the whole situation. And so, just to give you a sort of an idea, that just close your eyes and imagine yourself in sitting in 2050, and open your eyes and see what's driving the whole the scenario of clinical research. So I see financial resources or financial constraints, and this has been discussed, and there is no question about it, that the shortage of financial resources or the infrastructure support is missing, and that is one of the key elements of um, clinical development. The other thing that I look at is the indigenous discoveries. So why did I put up this indigenous discoveries? Because when I see CROs doing research on genes and biotech drugs and so on and so forth, I see that the difference between us and the developed world is huge, 2,000 versus 200,000. So even if we try to run and try to cover this gap, we will just end up with a burnout and more frustration, more difficulties. But what's the way out? The way out is the is working on the indigenous discoveries. And if we use public fund for developing these kind of facilities, then we also need to have a nationalist kind of view, whereby we use the local candidates for clinical research. And there are many examples where we have some locally produced things. For example, guar gum, Pakistan is number 2 in guar gum, and Pakistan, surprisingly, is the world's 7th largest economy in terms of agriculture. And that's something that we need to be looking at. So trends, the long list of trends, there's awareness, trained people, international influence, academic pressures. Yes, we need a lot of publications as well. And of course, the competitiveness, unmet medical needs, whereby we benefit from them. So when we plot these drivers on the x-axis and y-axis, So my fellow doctors would be slightly surprised to see how management is also becoming a science, and you have some scientific models which we can use to predict the future. So when I put them in the on the X and Y axis, we come up with 4 quadrants. Why do we need 4 quadrants? Because we are talking of 2050, and we are not so sure what I'm putting up today. And by the way, these are my views. Again, you can always change the drivers the way you think about it. You can add up more perspectives, and these are just tools which can help us in actually reaching up to the future and jumping into 2050. So if we put them on the financial resources on the y-axis and indigenous candidates on the x-axis. So the first quadrant would be a positive flow of financial resources and a positive work on indigenous candidates. So what do we see? The surgical instruments or the medical devices industry in Pakistan has grown. What I'm saying is basically a history of the future. And then the nutrition on which we have been working for the last 20 years is going to grow more into the future, and it's going to strengthen by 2050. And by that time we would have some data on that. And natural and organic remedies. Pakistan has always been boasting that we have local flora and fauna, and that a lot of natural substances on which we need to work on. And I think those also have developed in the last 25 years. And then the medicinal foods, just converting foods into medicines, for example, the fortified foods, and then foods for different health conditions. And that's an area where there is a lot to work on. Well, resources are high and indigenous candidates are low. The second quadrant as the logical incrementalism, the share of the pie. And I think we are quite stuck on this, that we always talk of the share. This is what I'm going to get from whatever the market is. But we don't talk about increasing the size of the pie. We can also look at why can't we expand the market? So, but since we are unable to do that, so we still end up making some money by exporting the raw materials. And I was in Chitral a couple of years ago, working on a hydropower project, and there was a Turkish consultant, and he showed me this wonderful stream of where we could produce 108 megawatts of power. And he said, it's not just water flowing down, it's actually the dollars which are flowing down. So we have those natural resources, but a wastage of those, or a satisfaction with the wastage of those is more detrimental. And then the doomsday scenario, or it's called the Flintstones, the minimalism, that we are happy with the way we are living, and then just it's a kind of a boiling frog syndrome. We don't care, we just move on. And yes, this is the fourth quadrant is basically where we have resources coming in, but we are actually doing a lot of international research, or part of the international research. We could be working on gene printing, on genetic reconstruction, human cloning, so on and so forth. But from a nationalist point of view, we could be bionic guinea pigs, and just working on the agendas of the others. So these are the scenarios that are possible in the year 2050. So let's just quickly see how we can strategize, if any or all of them happen. What could we do now in the year 2021 or 22, 23, so that by the time we reach 2050, so we have some sizable thing to boast upon, and a strategy which we could follow, and to get some positive results. So again, the scenarios actually help us in strategizing as well. And the first scenario that I just presented is almost the same. And we could actually move into focus on the surgical instruments, nutrition, natural and organic remedies, and medicinal foods. What do we need to be careful about the other scenarios? Because we see them as not a very nationalist scenarios, not very favorable scenarios for Pakistan. Um, in the second one, is just we could avoid dissatisfaction of the wastages that we are having at the moment. And for the second one, we could actually work on something very, very measurable, very, very tangible. We could actually have a performance measurement systems against a performance management. We always talk about generic things, but what gets measured gets done. And this is my next talk about the measurement systems. From the international trials, we don't let them go, but we also need to see what local benefits we can draw out of those international engagements, or the multi-center trials, or the trials in which we are part of a larger group or international research organization. Now, this is a bit complicated slide for those who are not very familiar with some management principles, but this is how we actually translate strategy into action, or we call S2A. Primarily, strategy has to be divided into four components: the financial, the customer, the internal, and the learning and growth perspective. So once we talk about the ecosystem in which we can operate, or we can actually reach to the end. So we need money. The top line that you see here, is how we need to make money. And there are various three ways I have proposed in which we can make money. From patents, licenses, spin-offs, and we can save money by focusing our resources onto areas which are in the national interest. But at the same time, we need to invest some few dollars into the repetition, because that thing has been put forward as one of the hindrances for not getting businesses and for not getting enough business. So what are the customers, or the taxpayers, or the funding agencies that are looking at in terms of the effectiveness of the research organizations? We need to be working on the commercializable candidates. I've seen this time and again while working on the committees of different these funding agencies, that a lot of researchers would be focusing, would be very comfortable with something that was developed in 1995 or 92 or 75, because they think that they have enough literature and they can just tweak it and then get away with their publication and their funding. They do not actually stick their neck out and work on the candidates which can actually fail. But in research, I think failure is a necessity, and that needs to be worked out. Consistency is also one of the keys, because it's a long-term process, and cost effectiveness, and again, branding, because I've been a humble student of marketing as well. It just doesn't happen because you're doing something nice. You have to actually beat the drum as well. One of my ex sort of mentors used to say, he was a surgeon, and he said that you have to have a scalpel in one hand and a drum in the other. So you have to beat it, and you have to tell the world that you're doing something nice. Processes also need to be updated, and the culture, and being a management and sort of operations manager, or what you call a facilitator or consultant. I think the culture also needs to be worked out. It's not this we have to have this culture. No, you have to have very clear milestones. You have to have very clear guidelines on how to change that culture. For example, the timekeeping, or maybe the punctuality. I think it has to be measured. It has to be hammered. It has to be drilled into the brains, developed into the habits of people. And one of the challenges that we have is that we cry a lot, and we complain a lot, but we hardly move an inch. We just just keep crying and keep crying and keep crying. But I think go-getting leadership is one thing that is required to actually get things going. And then long-term, I was reading one of the books of the McClellan, and I've been a behavioral scientist as well for a while. And if you have to change the mindset, you need at least 25 years. And that's what David McClellan and his team did with the US Foreign Service. And the results were amazing. So even in some communities, and I would not name them just because of the sanctity, but some communities actually work on their children right from the conception, the kind of food that the mother would eat, the kind of music that the mother would listen, and then till the time of birth of the babies, and then the how you actually modify the behavior of the babies and then the children and then the adults till the time they actually become what the society wants them to be. And the last but not the least is the bashing, and I've seen this on a number of occasions that we bash a lot. But instead of bash, let's work together towards cash. There was a big kind of a strategy explanation. Performance management. I will just quickly talk about this. That what you measure is what you get. On a number of occasions, we have recommendations. But recommendations do not mean or do not end up in something concrete, something tangible. So the Norton and Kaplan, which the balanced scorecard system that I work on, developed by Harvard, it says that what cannot be measured must not be done. So instead of just wasting your time to discuss and deliberate on things which cannot be measured, just leave them and work on some tangible results. And tangibles have to be like time, money, numbers, and alignment is important. Now I can see why did I say this in the very beginning, that the ecosystem is much bigger than we think, because I've been engaged with those ecosystems who are working on research, and by aligning the objectives of all these organizations, I think we can get better results rather than just working on a straight line. 180-degree line should be now looked at as a 360-degree line, in which we can incorporate all these issues and challenges. And yeah, 50% of my topic is gone, and now the 50% is just one slide. And so I think I'll just wrap it up very quickly. The challenges are known to everybody, and I think the challenges have been discussed again and again and again. And from my perspective, I think the world is looking at patient protection and data quality, and we have challenges with the resource constraints. I've been handling all these clinical trials, and a consultant would just do all these, say, for example, they would do the tests, they would use the dyes, they would have a procedure. They would not just simply record it. They would not just put it into the CRFs. They would say, okay, I don't have time for this, because probably they were not paid enough for this. The researchers in the academic institutes are actually paid like less than 1/5 of a practicing physician. So practicing physician would be more interested in money, and why not? I think there has to be some resources pumped into this in terms of their time and their value that they put into the things like informed consent and documentation and so on and so forth. Proposal writing. I think I just had a meeting a couple of days ago with a power project, and I was also a bit surprised. I have been into this, but I didn't know this earlier, that a bankable feasibility for a power project is written at a cost of about 500,000 US dollars in Pakistan. So just imagine the importance of writing a proposal which can win grants, and I think the time and effort that goes into the proposal writing also needs to be looked at, and the capacity, and also we just ignore the lobbying and relationship. I've been paid, to be very honest, very heavily on a number of occasions, um, just to develop relations with the government agencies, the regulators, and different stakeholders. And a lot of other industries recognize this as a reality. But I think the clinical research organizations and the organizations which are working on this also need to take into account that there has to be some relationship building and some lobbying activities which should go into this and make it part of their strategy. Um, and there is a research fund available in DRAP. But unfortunately, again, the stakeholders have not been able to put together a policy. And the last example that I can relate is the information technology industry. There is a similar fund which is available which is being collected by the IT companies, the IP providers, and the technology companies. But this fund was again going into the government kitty and not being used. But lately, these organizations actually got together and put pressure on the government to make a board and use that fund for the benefit of the industry. And they actually came up with the projects. And now there's a full-fledged organization by the name of Ignite, which is actually disbursing and taking charge of all these funds and giving it to the research projects to universities and educational institutions. So I think that also needs to be worked out with the Drug Regulatory Authority and Ministry, so that we have better resources for research activities. I think this is certainly my last slide. The skills and competencies. I think we have talked a lot about challenges and opportunities and strategy and so on and so forth. But how do we actually do it? We have experts in clinical research. We have experts in clinical sciences. We have experts in biotechnology and so on and so forth. But do we have experts who are persistent, who can deal with the resistance from different agencies, the kind of pace that the others would be would be putting up? For example, you're moving at 100 kilometers and then you just come up at the front with somebody who's driving at 10 kilometers. So how do you deal with that? And then again and again and again, you have to strike your head against the wall. But how many times you do it just without losing any heart? So I think that's a competency, and I'm one of the consultants for a lot of organizations whereby we check these behaviors and assess people on how persistent and consistent they are. Minimalism, yes, we have to live with it, and we have to deal with it. We have to generate more resources instead of just crying that we don't have this, we don't have that. So somebody who is comfortable with not having a plush office or a secretary or staff to do it, can I do it myself? Yes, sometimes yes, I can. So I think that's the kind of attitude that we need. And attention to details is one of the competencies which is required for clinical research anyway, the documentation and so on and so forth. Quality standards, yes, we have hard time in actually, and where I would like to refer to Dr. Sarwat Hussain Saab, with all due respect, that we worked for a while on this the healthcare quality, and the tough time that we had is understandable. So the adaptation of those standards is extremely important for all the organizations that are engaged in this. Networking, the people they're much easier to handle, they're much easier to convince, and it's a science. You have to join hands with people. Last but not the least, confusion management is and sailing into the uncharted waters. These are things that have never happened before. In the last few years, I've been working on projects of national interest, big projects, almost $90 billion worth of projects happening in Pakistan. And we had similar kind of complaints, but I had one understanding that these kind of projects have never happened in Pakistan. So the capacity of the organizations or the ministries, 45 ministries, is very limited in understanding, in actually handling these kind of projects. and that needs to be developed. And there has to be a lot of patience, and there has to be a lot of input instead of just getting frustrated and just get over with it. And these are the kind of skills and behaviors that we can actually develop in our team or develop in ourselves. So with this, I think I don't know whether I have just added any value to your already body of knowledge, but this was a practitioner's, this was a strategist and a futurist kind of view. And I think I hope that you can benefit from the structure of it, if not the contents of it. And with this, I will just submit myself again to Dr. Errol Ghanisa, and
Thank you, Dr. Awaise Siraj. What a wonderful presentation. And that is basically the ground level realities. So without understanding the culture, without understanding the bottlenecks, you can't move forward. So that is a very, very realistic view. I will request Professor Farooq Naeem to please unmute his mic, because he's working in a very specialist niche, field of science, the psychiatry, and I would like, but he is having the background from Pakistan and understand the culture and everything. Maybe he can ask you some question and Mazid highlight some of the key aspects about the challenges in clinical research. Professor Farooq Naeem, please.
Thank you. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Awaise, it was really amazing, actually. What I really liked was, it was really grounded in realities, number one. Number two, you built a bigger picture, because, people think research is all about methodology, but you brought in branding. I never heard of branding until I actually started working in research, and I've started getting, mentorship for that. So there's so much really that's around, and you really built it beautifully. And I also like that you didn't, you were very realistic, Now, one of the things, my work is actually mainly in global mental health. So nearly 40-50% of my publication, my work is actually from Pakistan. So I have some ideas of how things work. One thing, and Awaise, I'm asking for your opinion too, I have noticed is the culture. And we can talk about the rest of the thing. I think the one thing that's really is the culture. The difference I see between a Pakistani university and a British university where I used to work, and now in Canadian universities, and just generally the culture is the culture of asking questions. Right. I mean, I even actually, when I think about it, I think, when I look at the history of Renaissance, I think the difference between the Dark Ages and the Renaissance was actually people were allowed to ask questions during the period of Renaissance. And that's how all the kind of developments in science and everything, if you can't question the dogmas, if you can't question the existing values, you can do the kind of, maybe meta-analysis, but, you can't create new ideas, because in order to do that, you need to be able to question things. What are your views on this and other cultural barriers that you think, are holding Pakistan?
Yeah, well, thank you very much. I think I would just relate it with a little story. The first time I went to Lahore University of Management Sciences, LUMS, for a lecture, and within the first 30 seconds, there were hands up, asking for a question. And I was a bit surprised that, let me talk for, maybe 15 minutes, and then, you can always have questions. But then I got to know that they have actually developed this culture with force. And there is a guy sitting there with the picture of every participant in his hand, and actually noting down how many questions were asked. So in order to develop that culture, that's a culture. Somebody would just say, okay, why don't you ask questions? But unless it is measured, it is, it is numbered, it is scored, and for a consistent period of time, and then people are rewarded and reprimanded on that culture. So that needs to be developed. And the second, quickly. My son has been just debarred from his university lately, for a week or so for asking questions. He's in this bad habit. So I think there is a big gap in which that needs to be worked out.
Yeah, yeah. If a question does not make you or people around you uncomfortable, there's no bloody point in asking that question.
And I don't want to be offensive, but I think, unfortunately, our not asking question is rooted in the way we understand and practice religion, and actually in religion you are supposed to question, and that's what I can't speak in front of Awaise about Quran, and in Quran it says ponder, question, discuss, ask question, ask. But our, you know what I'm saying. I think there's a big
You're
thought
right.
and story behind it.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Yep. Akhtar, do you want to say anything? And I think we can then open the floor for everyone.
Sure.
I suppose.
So first of all, thank you, Dr. Awaise. I think you have very nicely summarized it, as Professor Farooq has mentioned. And I was looking at your slide, especially the last two slides where you put the challenges and opportunities in one boat, okay, which actually a bigger picture than this. But you put all those, कहते हैं ना दरिया को कूजे में बंद करना या समंदर को कूजे में बंद करना. So I move forward. I'm moving from this topic of culture. I'm going with the mindset. If I remember, I'm a 92 graduate of Dow Medical College. Our time, there was no research at that time. Only researchers were the FCPS Part 2 people. And or you are doing a master's or PhD. And then I see when I keep visiting our college, Dow Institute of Health Sciences, I see the medical students start working on those little audits and quality assurance and some research. I think I saw a little title there, school, research in a school. If we don't bring that research thing or quality thing or other mindset in our school children, we will not be able to develop this. Because this is very important to start from your childhood, where you can see what are the changes, and then they can grow. To grow them, it is important they can start from very early. This is the one point. Second point is, I know you have put a lot of challenges, but first I will commend the APPNA Merit has done a huge advocacy for research, especially last few months, although they have been doing it for some years, but especially last few months for advocacy, broke the barrier between the regulators, facilitate the talks between the researchers across globe. But I still ponder, what is the challenge which has still hindering us that we are not able to attract global researchers towards Pakistan as compared to other neighboring countries? I know about quality concerns and regulatory concerns, but what do you think? What else is missing that we as an expat or we as a researcher in this part of the world can do to improve it?
I think, first of all, thank you very much for a very comprehensive question. In my opinion, this has to be done with a lot of resources. And many a times these organizations or these hospitals do not have these kind of resources or understanding. Let me give you the simplest example. If anybody wants to visit, for example, a trial manager from even Philippines wants to visit, say, Mayo Hospital. So how to get the visa? We don't know. We are just stuck with this. And then if we have the visa, then there would be some security agencies following that gentleman up and how to deal with them. I think these are very trivial things, and then the accommodations, and then the resources, and then the funds. So I put them all together in the resources, not only in terms of financial resources, but also in terms of the administrative support that we get from the institutions. For example, I work for a kind of military institution, and this is probably the first institution that has put up a PC1 that we call a project proposal to the government of Pakistan. It has been approved since 2017. It's a 100-bedded hospital kind of, or a dedicated clinical research facility and a bioequivalence center to be made with the public money. But as we speak, we are unable to yet put the first brick on it because we are having challenges with the planning commission. We are having challenges with the revisions. But the leadership at this point of time of National University, I'm not speaking on their behalf, but this is something to be praised. So I'm just putting it up front. The leadership of General Imran Majid is actually so consistent that they understand the dynamics, that things have to be brought into action. Just a slight digression from my medical graduates, for my medical colleagues. I worked on Neelam Jhelum hydropower project. Since we are all Pakistanis, so we have our heart into all these power projects. So Neelam Jhelum power project was a PC1 of 1985. So it was actually the first megawatt was produced in 2017. And so these kind of projects take such a long time. So we are not slow. There is a professor in my ex-colleague. He would say that, I'm not fat, but my height is low. My height is less. So we are not we are not dead, but our speed is slow. So I think that's the kind of thing that we need to be looking at for different.
Let me add one thing in 30 seconds, if you allow me, is that being a Canada-Pakistan Research and Development Council, our several members of it has been working on called MyTech, which is going to open the doors for our Pakistani universities researchers like PhDs and masters who can come and join the professors in the Canadian university, and they complete their research or they embark upon some new research. And this is something just the beginning. And it is a funded program as well. So it's just the beginning, and we are proud to mention this. This is what we have been successful, and it is going to be more into the school, and researchers will tell you this more.
Thank you.
Sorry, just sir, with all due respect, I will just take, sir, I think that this is where you need to be, talking to various organizations. For example, the Pakistan Embassy, the Foreign Office, Higher Education Commission, Pakistan Science Foundation, universities individually, just spread the word around, even Board of Investment, Planning Commission, so on and so forth, just all the Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Health, so that the voice gets heard from one corner or the other, and then somebody is just taking charge of it. So because in the government organizations, you write to one organization, sometimes it goes into the bin, and this is very natural. And one should not be frustrated with this. Just keep on hammering it, I said. So I think while you think that we are the ones who are supporting, we are the ones who are funding and everything, but no one is interested because probably not many knew about it. So I think that's where the marketing thing, as said by Dr. Farooq Saab as well, also comes in. That's how you actually promote that kind of stuff. Sir, my apologies.
If I may, Mike, comment about the research. I think when people should be tolerant of upfront investment in the research, because to build the culture of research also requires a lot of resources without any returns. And similarly, a lot of upfront returns, upfront investment, and which might be considered as a wastage of money, needs to be done in order to even reach the ground level of rewarding research. And we consider that we can fund a project in Pakistan versus fund a project in a Western country that will get similar results. We cannot, because has been a tremendous amount of investment that has gone on to the baseline beyond which you begin to receive dividends of research. So I think we need to be tolerant.
Thank you, Dr. Sarvat. We have a couple of questions from the participant. And so let me have a
I think
look.
Dr. Farasad wanted to comment something as well.
Yeah,
in the
yes,
meantime.
Dr. Farasad, go ahead. You please comment.
Sir. Thank you. I think this was the one point that was made by Professor Farouk about the culture. I think this was really the nail that actually really he asked about the issue in our system. First of all, I'm Farasad from the Karolinska Institute, Stockholm. So wonderful presentation, Dr. Awaise, and it really tells us about the problems and challenges that you highlighted. In the culture, when we talk about the culture, what I also noticed that even the prominent organizations in Pakistan, like universities or even the research institutes, they do not use their institutional emails in correspondence. So I think this is one of the biggest, another big problem. It really tells us lack of professionalism within our organizations. And that's why many people, I mean, I have tried to connect people from Stockholm in Pakistan for some collaborative projects, and they were insisting them to use from here in Pakistan to use their institutional emails for safety reasons and for security reasons. And many other, when you talk about patient and many things, right? So one would not like to communicate about certain patients and their history on sending email to Yahoo or Gmail, and then you learn a few days later that his email was hacked and now everything is out on the internet, right? So I think that is also something very important to consider, how to increase the professionalism locally in our system. Thank you.
100% agreed.
Thank you very much, Dr. Farasad. So I was just looking to any specific question from the participant, and these are generally the general one that the people have commented. And I have responded to a bunch of questions by myself. So where I know, who is the one who is looking after the regulatory aspect of clinical trials in Pakistan. Dr. Siraj, I have a specific question. Do you see based on your own knowledge, a real growth of clinical research in Pakistan? Because recently I was told that the Gate Foundation is considering to have a center in Pakistan for clinical research because they are working on some innovation in healthcare, and they would like to have the solution is meant for the developing countries. As you know, that the Gate Foundation is a strong partner for Serum Institute of India, where they developed the some of the vaccine of really importance in Africa, and they funded everything. So a lot of funds are available, and they are meant to solve the problem of developing countries. So based on your own information set, do you see that there is going to be some recent growth in clinical research in Pakistan in some explosive way?
Sir, thank you very much. I think there are two things. I mean, to be very honest, I don't know very specifically about this Gates Foundation, but there is one thing that I know very specifically is that we have a serious challenge with the proposal writing, and
Yes.
also coming up with the ideas and also put them into the kind of words that are required by specific donors. So we're trying to come up, at least at my university. I'm the one who signs on the final submissions of the funding, and I feel sorry sometimes. But the times are limited, the timelines are really over the top of our heads, so that we need to submit that. But I think somewhere down the line we have to actually develop the capacity of the researchers to actually, research is one thing, and I'm not challenging that competency anyway. But I think specifically proposal, but because I've done this for UNDP, I've done this for a lot of other organizations, everybody is looking for a specific lingo, specific structure, specific jargons that you need to get those funding. Funding is available. I mean, HEC is funding, Pakistan Science Foundation is funding. I mean, we are talking of our own public PSDP funds that are available. But the question is that whether we are able to come up with new proposals with novel ideas, some indigenous solutions, some homegrown challenges. and of course, the proposals that are required to be understood by the the experts, national as well as international. So I think this is what I see as a bigger challenge rather than the availability of resources. I hope I have addressed your question,
Yeah.
but I think yeah.
Thank you.
On a
We have,
humorous, sorry, go ahead.
sorry, we have a question from the participant, Mr. Mansoor Ahmed. The question is, do we have IRB within academic centers, or there are private IRBs? What is FTA equivalent organization in Pakistan? So if you know about these issues, or maybe Professor Farooq or Siraj, you can comment on this.
Raj can, and then I'll come in on IRB.
IRB, I think it's now mandatory for all the educational institutions. It's part of my job to have an IRB notified, institutional review board notified, and updated from time to time. So it's a mandatory requirement of the Higher Education Commission. So every academic institution is supposed to have it. On a national level, there are two actually bodies. One is the National Bioethics Committee, which is responsible for all the ethical reviews, and they are fairly efficient, I would say. And then because I had one case in 2015, and I think that was processed very quickly. The other is the Drug Regulatory Authority, which is also developing its systems. It has its own challenges, and every body will have their own challenges. There's no question about it. But I think these guys are generally very, very conducive to whatever is happening, and they need to be just we need to make them understand what they're going to do, and I think that's fine. There's no bigger.
Thank you, Professor Farooq. That's the final comment because we have reached the time limit of 60 minutes.
Yep.
And your final comment, and then the thank you note from Professor Sarwat, and then we will close the session. Yes,
Thank you.
please.
Yeah. So no, I just agree. Awaise already answered the question. I think while it is requirement, I know that many medical colleges still do not have, especially in the periphery, they do not have IRB, Awaise. And that's number one. Number two, I think it really is about improving the processes, and
Yes.
culture, resources, all those kind of things will come later. But I think it's really about improving the processes. I get so many emails from students who are doing PhD in Pakistan because it's AGC requirement that they should have one examiner who is foreigner. Sometimes actually some students even ask for a Gora examiner, which, so I actually passed the message to one of my postdocs because they usually are Goras. So, but you see, this is kind of, but the thing is, I feel sorry for those students who actually have to find an examiner in the world who's working in one of the universities in the Western world. So I think these are tiny little things which are huge barriers. Second, I think starting some kind of small funding Awaise for students. There's nothing for master PhD degree students. They have to do their research for free. This is unbelievable. I have no idea. And it's not surprising that you see all this kind of, pleasuresome, and you see all these kind of cut and paste and all this. And I'm not going to go into those kind of details because I'm sure, those who are aware of the ground realities. And I have finally one idea. I think if Pakistan and India, at least Pakistan, start competing with India in research rather than cricket, Pakistan will be a lot better in every way. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the final word, and thank you from Professor Sarwat.
Well, thank you very much, Awaise Sahab. This was actually opened the several windows of the mind that were either not there or were closed for a long time, and very, very good. The only couple of comments I will say about proposal writing is really every aspect of our life has its own language. Love has its own language, and when you send a proposal for marriage, that has a language, and therefore proposal writing has its own language. And unless you speak the right language, the people cannot decipher your intent. The second point I would like to say is that I think in addition to encouragement and funding, etc., accountability is important. And accountability is sometimes misunderstood. But I cannot, when I talk about accountability, I think of Bob Haldeman. You know, Bob Haldeman was Nixon's chief of staff, and he used to say that if you have dash 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 certain part of their anatomy in your hand, and it's certainly not the neck, their hearts will follow. So with that, I am very grateful for your comments and teaching, and it's actually, I think, one of the very philosophical as well as business as well as science, very comprehensive. You are a person of all seasons. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
everybody, and goodbye. Thank you for your participation. Everybody,
Thank you.
thank you very
Bye-bye.
much. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.